Okay, good morning to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today, which is a very special day, because believe it or not, today is shiur 100. We've had 100 shiurim in Siyata D'Shmaya, which is, balloons, yeah, I mean, you couldn't really have food or drink, it's before Shabbat, most of us. 101, yeah. But, and the day after is 102, and so on. But what a remarkable thing, and an opportunity to express gratitude to Hashem for giving us the ability to cover the amount that we've covered. And you know, for me, I don't know if you feel this way, but in my life there's like a definitive before and after, in terms of even just the getting up earlier and being consistent in that way. It's certainly in terms of all that we've covered and the amount that we've grown together and connected with each other here, those who are in the room and those who are on the Zoom and those who are following online. Couldn't think of another word that rhymes with Zoom and room. But those who are following around with us, it's a tremendous privilege. Tremendous privilege. Ashreinu chelkeinu manorim garelenu. And with gratitude for the past and Barakash ala Asid, we carry on and continue our journey through Torah of Beis. Today's shiur is generously sponsored by Rebbe Klein, Nishma, his father, whose yahrzeit is today, Yud Beis Tammuz Yaakov ben Yishayahu, and his mother, Rivka Bryndel Bas Tzvi Simcha, the neshamas should have an aliyah, particularly the neshama of his father, Alav Shalom, whose yahrzeit is today on day 100 of our series together. So let's jump back in. With Hashem's help, we continue with Ice Tess. We learned yesterday about the way in which that the same way that within an individual yid there's neshama and guf, right? There's etzem and basar. And the basar and the neshama need to be close together so they can communicate. And the basar can hear the messages of the neshama. And that takes kol. And the kol should be listened to and understood in a proper way. So too in the collective, you have the tzaddik and all of Klal Yisrael who are in the aspect of guf and neshama. And we said yesterday that sometimes if the people are not close to the tzaddik, if there's no connection between them, then the voice of the tzaddik, which is the voice of guidance and musar, can actually cause what's called a kol havara, can cause opposite ways of feeling and thinking, that instead of being empowering and instead of providing guidance and elevation and elevating, instead what you have is people feeling pushed down, you have people feeling disempowered, you have people feeling like hope is lost, and that can happen. And so in order to make sure that the body and the soul are connected within the individual, it's mitzvahs maisios, right? Get the body involved in the mitzvahs, but get the body involved, not just do the mitzvahs. Obviously, mitzvahs can't be done by a soul, right? But meaning that the body should enjoy the mitzvahs, right? There should be some element of the mitzvah experience where we're able to communicate with the body. This is not only good for me, right? Meaning for the etzem, for the I, for the ani, for the neshama, it's good for the body as well. And the way that the body and soul in the collective level, right, which is the level of the am, the level of the nation, are able to come together is through shimush, chachamim, identifying with this tzaddik, doing the best that we can to connect to the tzaddikim and to carry their torch in the world. And the more that we do that, the more that our heart opens up to their messages, and it's a symbiotic relationship which grows and advances and develops with time. But really, what's required is azas to kedusha, right? That was the element that we already learned in Ois Daled. You need azas in order to break free from the power structures that have azas malchusa b'loi taga, right? Where it's like dictatorial, a person's being controlled against their will. In order to find the true tzaddikim, we need azas to kedusha, right? A person needs to find that inner sense of confidence. How does that happen? Ois Tess. In order to arrive at azas to kedusha, simcha, the only way is through joy. Joy brings to holy confidence. And you find this, right? When people are sad, naturally strips them of their confidence. They find it hard to show up in the world. People naturally want to, just bury their head under the pillow and stay in their room, and they don't want to be around other people. They don't feel expanded. They feel, right? The Gemara describes a tefach atzuv and a tefach sochek, right? A tefach is a hand's breadth, a measurement. That's atzuv means when the hand is squeezed together, right? A tefach sochek, the Gemara uses this terminology to describe an expanded tefach, or a person's making a hand's breadth but the fingers are spread, as a laughing tefach. Why? Because simcha expands, atzvus contracts. It's going to be hard for a person to feel confidence, which is an outward energy, the energy of Dina, who is a yatzanit, right? Dina bas Leah, both, Rashi tells us, had the energy of being yatzanit. There was some element of joy there. There was an expansivity there. There was the desire to go out and to change the world. That's only possible if it's a tefach sochek. It is only possible if you have over there joy. But Bechinas, the pasuk says in Nehemiah, Ki chedvas Hashem hi ma'uzchem. Chedvas Hashem hi ma'uzchem. The joy and rejoicing, the delight, the celebration with Hashem, hi ma'uzchem. That is what will give you strength. So oiz, azas to kedusha, is a direct effect of a person feeling joyous, feeling simcha. Ha'invay ayidei bechinas Naaseh and Nishma. So what's the chedva? So we know what oiz is. We spoke about azas to kedusha, feeling that strength and that confidence to be able to stand up and find one's own way in the world, and that's a result of joy. But how do you get joy? Says the Rebbe, joy is through Naaseh and Nishma. Shehu bechinas hasimcha, because Naaseh and Nishma is which we're going to see what that means in a minute, is the aspect of simcha. The Gemara in Shabbos Beis tells us, B'shasha Amr Yisrael Naaseh and Nishma, what Klal Yisrael said Naaseh and Nishma, Yardu Shishim Ribu Malachim, 600,000 Malachim, angels came down. V'nasnu Shnei Ataris B'reish Kol Echad, and they placed 2 crowns on the head of every member of Klal Yisrael. One for Naaseh, one for Nishma. Shechatu, when Klal Yisrael sinned, they were taken away. Va'asad HaKadosh Baruch Hu lachzir lahem. The Gemara says HaKadosh Baruch Hu is asid, will eventually return them. Shenemar. How do we know that Hashem will return these 2 crowns of Naaseh and Nishma? Because the pasuk says v'simchas olam al reisham. We will eventually have eternal joy on our heads. Says the Gemara, what is that eternal joy? The 2 crowns of Naaseh and Nishma. How do you get joy? Naaseh and Nishma. Nimtzad emerges. Naaseh and Nishma hi bechinas simcha. Naaseh and Nishma result in, are an aspect of simcha. Bechinas, the aspect of the pasuk, the simchas olam al reisham. That pasuk is a reference to the returning crowns, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would give us these crowns back. And how are these crowns described? By the word v'simchas olam. Says the Rebbe, Naaseh and Nishma are the aspect of simcha. Okay, so what does it mean? What's Naaseh and Nishma? So if you hear, our assumption is in learning the Sefer, it's been our assumption from the beginning, that if these Torahs are in the order that they're in, it's not stam. They weren't just haphazardly, collected. They are arranged in a very, very specific order, because many of the concepts flow one to the next. That was the yesod of the whole cumulative flow, right? The whole stream of consciousness project, which is ongoing, obviously, is for the purpose of trying to identify that central theme and to track how one Torah flows into the next. Over here, it's very obvious. Because just go back to Torah Chof Aleph for a second. The whole inyan of Torah Chof Aleph, if you remember, was all about makif and pnim. Where the Rebbe said that be'etzem, gilui, revelation of spiritual energy, is Ein Sof. It is fundamentally extant. It exists in and of itself, without any distinction between different layers and levels. It just is. It's eternal energy of just flow. From our perspective, that we're limited vessels, we are journeying higher and higher, or it's all relative. It depends who's moving, right? It's relativity, right? Either we are moving up or the energy is moving through us, however you want to see it. Sometimes it's even possible, if you imagine, because video games, right, and sort of, I guess, video games have and virtual reality spaces have availed us the perspective of the sensation of moving, even though you're not actually moving. So in a certain sense, even if you're walking down the street, you can just like sort of shift. Obviously, it's not true from our perspective. You can shift into the perspective where you're just literally, you're just walking, and all of reality is approaching you, right? Like, meaning, and sometimes it's useful to toggle between these two elements, because what's real? You know, what do we know? Maybe the whole world is approaching me. Maybe I'm not actually traveling anywhere, right? From it seems like somebody's ringing the bell. Do you want to just run in and see? Let somebody in. So, Oh, okay. Sorry, Yitzi. Yeah. So, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. So, sometimes you don't know what's coming close to what and what's moving through what. However, from the standpoint of our own personal ability to be kolet, to grasp, there's a distinction between pnim and makif. It means relative to where we are at any given moment, there's a makif, which is the energy beyond us. Then there's a makif to that makif, and so on, like we said. And then there's pnim, which is the spiritual perception we've been able to integrate and we understand. Then we move. And again, there's no, like we said, there's no fundamental distinction in the like the parchment. It's just being like pulled down under a groove, right, so to speak, and that's sort of changing the layer, the level. But the parchment is the same. It's just we are processing. And the part of the infinite energy that's in us is called pnim, that moment. The part that's beyond is called makif. And the whole energy,
So it's the idea of that according to the guru, according to how deep it is.
Sure, right. That's what we learned in Torah Chof Aleph. Right? So this is how the infinite light integrates. That was essentially the whole Torah Chof Aleph from the standpoint of the pasuk Nachamu Ami, where the Rebbe said Nachamu Makif and Makif lemakif, right? That's where our nechama is. We just gave a whole shiur yesterday. If you're not following the Sichas Ran series, there's no pressure. Usually, obviously, there's never any pressure. But I don't, if it's your prerogative to listen to that series or not. But this one shiur, highly, highly recommend, especially for our chevra. I think you'll appreciate it very, very deeply. I will send it to the group. I don't think it's posted yet. I have to check if she posted it. But huge siyata d'shmaya, and apparently big sidus because the internet shut off in the middle and all the people on the Zoom dropped off, and I just continued giving the shiur to the camera after obviously attempting to get that back on, but it didn't work. But really, I mean, it's just remarkable. And Sichas Haran speaks about that Sicha Kafir Gimel, speaks about the biographical biographical information surrounding the revelation of Likutei Moharan Tinyana Torah Ayin Ches, which is the lesson where Rebbe Nachman announces Ein Shem Yesh B'Adam Klal. And it tells the whole story of how that lesson came to be. It was a lesson that he taught on Shabbos Nachamu, and it was all about expanded consciousness. Ayin Sham, it's Pilei Plaim, that especially our chevra, especially those who learned Torah Vav together, will particularly appreciate it. Unbelievable sight is there. Might be one of the most important shiurim in Breslov that I've given, and I've given a lot of shiurim now in Breslov. So I don't say that lightly. It was a very, very fundamental shiur, particularly the last bit that nobody was there for on the Zoom, which nobody's heard yet. So kedai. I believe Nadra I'll send it. So Nachman Ami. That was the whole inyan of Torah Chof Aleph. Right? Nachman, Nechama, Nachamu. This is a direct continuation of that. So here we jump in. Veda says the Rebbe Kishnei Ha'adayim She'echtir B'chayrev Naaseh and Nishma He Mechinas Bereishis Bara. These two crowns with which HaKadosh Baruch Hu crowned us at Sinai, at Chayrev, from Naaseh and Nishma, are the aspect of Bereishis Bara. Bereishis and Bara. Kamuva b'Sifra Ditzniusa, as is brought in the 5th parak of Sifra Ditzniusa, with which we began our lesson, Torah Chof Beis. Bereshis da maimer, bara chatzi maimer. We said that the word Bereshis is 6 letters. That's maimer shalem, right? That's a full and complete utterance. Bara, 3 letters, is half of the word Bereshis, right? Bereshis, bara, means there's a diminishing, disappearing energy that was first revealed in full and then revealed in half. That's Bereshis bara. And all of existence functions on these 2 planes. There's a plane of completion and there's a plane of chetzi. Da Eiden Ilah, Eiden Tata. The full expression, Bereshis, is called Eiden Ilah, is the upper Eden. And bara, which is the diminutive expression, right? The smaller, diminished, truncated perspective is called Eiden Tata. Right? Eiden Ilah, Eiden Tata. Bereshis, bara. Chochmah Ilah, Chochmah Tata. Upper Chochmah, which is fully expressed, and our limited Chochmah, Chochmah Tata. Av uben, the Father and Son. Okay, so basically what the Zohar Kadosh is telling us over here, it's Savarditzi, so that all of reality is already contained in those first 2 words. Bereshis bara, is everything there is. Bereshis bara are the 2 sides of reality. Bereshis is the fully revealed, beyond time and space, godly Chochmah Ilah that sees the whole master plan, meaning that Magid Mireshis Achers Ani Rishon Ani Acharon, the fully expressed aspect of Beis to Taf, right? And then the Aleph is even beyond it, so it's aberracious in a certain sense, because the white parchment that's right before the Beis is the aspect of the infinite, right? Which is essentially, if you think of it very, very deeply, without going into to do the whole parchment of the Sefer Torah is the Aleph. The whole parchment is the Aleph. The whole parchment is the Aleph that contains the rest of the Torah, which begins with Beis. But the Beis is on the letter of expressivity. The Aleph is beyond. The Aleph is Ayin, it's Keser, it's Atzilus, it cannot be expressed, but it's there because it's the context for all the other letters of the Torah, which is all of existence.
Driving force.
And then, the motivating and containing energy of all of reality. Then the Beis in Bereshis is the letter Beis. And the Taf of Bereshis is the letter Taf. It's the end of the Aleph Beis. So all of reality. Bara is our perspective. Limited. Within time and space, unfolding moment by moment. All of reality is in Bereshis and Bara. Whoever's tea that is, that smells delicious. Oh, delicious. Thank you. Thank you for benefiting us. Sorry for those on the video. Technology will one day advance where you'll be able to smell what we smell, but for the better, for the worse. Anyway, this morning for the better. Okay, so let's continue. Ki Naaseh and Nishma b'chinas nestaros v'niglas. Says the Heilige Rebbe, Naaseh and Nishma is an aspect of Nister and Nigla. Naaseh hu b'chinas niglas. Naaseh, the doing, obviously relates to the Olam Ha'asiyah, which is the aspect of Malchus. Malchus is the aspect of the Olam Ha'asiyah. The last Hey Yud Kevavke correlates with action, practicality, actualization, and that's Nigla, right? That meaning that's the revealed reality. So it's Naaseh. Hainu HaMitzvahs she'efshel l'chol echad l'kayim l'fi madrigasai. This is the Niglas HaTorah. This is what's revealed. You see, it says to where it sits. We learn Torah Shaviksav, Torah Shavapeh, Paiskim. You know what tzitzis are, where it sits. Yafa, Nigla. You can actualize it. Nishma b'chinas nistaris. Nishma is the hidden. Now, from the standpoint of the capacities of perception or perceptual capacities, seeing all of the spheres in the face, because of the face, the head is generally atzilus, and so all of the elements are going to be connected, right? All the spheres are going to be represented in the face itself already.
Yes.
So the faculty of hearing is associated with the sphera of Binah. The eyes are Chochmah, Ezehu Chacham, Chochmah, Ha, Roya, Sanoila, Re'iyah is connected to Chochmah. We say in the morning, especially in Nosach Sfard, V'sein b'libenu, Bina, but even without Nusach Svar, the next word is lahavin, leave that Bina, but the same libenu, lahavin, Bina, lahavin, ulahaskil, lishmoya. Bina is hearing. Chochmah is seeing. Chochmah sees the big picture. And we learned this already, right, in previous year. Bina is one detail by one detail. We learned about shofar, right? Trei koil l'mishtamai, right? Except where it's that's chaviv, then you're really focused. But generally speaking, you cannot hear two things at the same time. So one detail by one detail.
There's a Chochmah connected to Shmiya, because there's a Chochmah in Kaladam. So you have also the Shmiya.
And you have Ri'iyah by Bina, right? Because the pasuk says Havin says in Sefer Yetzirah Havin b'Chochmah v'Chakam b'Bina, because Chochmah and Bina are always connected. But fundamentally, this is the headquarters of both. You have both by each other, but that's not what Chochmah is fundamentally. Chochmah fundamentally is seeing, Bina fundamentally is hearing, and that's always the way that it is. Right?
And that's Torah was crossed.
And
Matan Torah was crossed,
this is what we're going to get into now. And that's why in the Zohar Kodesh you have Tachazi, because the Zohar Kodesh is seeing, Chochmah, Nister, and in the Gemara you have Tashma, because the Gemara is Bina, right? Is the consciousness of details, specific parameters, hearing. Naaseh and Nishma in this context, if you think of it, is the absolutely ultimate or pinnacle of Pnim, from the standpoint of integration into our reality, is the inyan of Naaseh, Malchus. It does not get lower. Malchus is the Kli. It is the ultimate form of integration, actualization. And Lahepech, the ultimate Makif, Klape Olam Hazeh, is Bina, which is one beyond the system. Bina, the realm of miracles. Bina, Olam Haba, which Shabbos, which is Malchus, is only a me'ain Olam Haba, because these two things mirror one another. It's the first Hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei and the last Hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? And then the Vav in between. So these are the two sides of the spectrum. So from the standpoint of Pnim integration, we go to the last Hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei, integrated. From the standpoint of the source of all of what we could perceive, because Chochmah is completely beyond, we need Chochmah to come down into Bina, and then we're able to grasp it. I think we learned that also in Torah Chaf Aleph, if I'm not mistaken, that we access that light of Chochmah within the vessel of Bina. Makif is the first day. This is Naaseh and Nishma. Naaseh is Malchus, Nishma is Bina. Yeah? Understand? Yeah, Naaseh is Malchus, it's Olam Asiyah. Bina relates to hearing, so Bina is Nishma. So the Rebbe says, V'nishma b'chinas nistares. Nishma is the aspect of Nister Mashu Gavoya v'Nister Mimenu, which is completely above and hidden from us. She'eni yachal asas avoda b'zeh, where a person does not know what the avoda is. So here the Rebbe says a fascinating thing. Ordinarily, we think about Nigla and Nister from the standpoint of, let's say, the mitzvah of tzitzis. There's a nigla of the mitzvah of tzitzis, right, which is what tzitzis is, how to use it, how to wear it, how to make tzitzis, what the halachas of tzitzis are. And then the nister is the panemius of tzitzis, right, meaning those very same psukim, and to go into the Rosh Tevis, Sefer Tevis, Remez, Jerush, Soy, to be able to go into the deeper meanings of what these strings are, what they represent, what's the tcheles, why are these white and that blue, soidas. That's usually what we think about Nigla and Nister. Here the Rebbe says something completely different. You know what Nister is? Lemashal etzel kol mitzvah yesh devarim shesvivois ha-mitzvah. Every single aspect of the Torah Kadosha that's presented is always presented with surrounding text that is extraneous to the mitzvah itself. Because aside from the actual words in the Torah that introduce that tell us what the mitzvah is, there are many other words in the Torah, like, and Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, right? And Lamar means to give over to Klal Yisrael. Tzaves b'nei Yisrael v'yamarta aleim. You know, so. Says the Rebbe, all of these other words that aren't mitzvahs themselves, that don't seem to have any avodah, but there's an avodah there. But va'avodah sheyesh b'diburi haTorah halalo shesvivus hamitzvah hem bechinas nishma bechinas nister ki hamitzvah ba'atzman yichad on l'kayim ach ha'avodah sheyesh be'elu ha'diburim ein anu yodim. So bechinas nishma bechinas nister. Says the Rebbe, there's an avodah there. There's some way for me to serve Hashem with the words Vayedaber Hashem u'Moshe Lemar. I have no idea what, but there's an avodah there. Says the Rebbe, right now it's beyond us. It's on the level of nister. That's how that Rebbe understands. Naaseh is the mitzvah itself. Nishma is that which is beyond.
So he's not referring to smichas or anything like that.
No. What do you mean smichas?
When Rashi always asks why is this nismuch to that, and he brings down Medrash or Gemara, that's nigla.
Apparently, yeah. No, the Rebbe is very specific. He's speaking about the words in the Torah that are, you don't see any meaning in them, right, outside of what they say. So the Rebbe says, "V'zebuchinas Torah u'tfila." This is the aspect of Torah and tefillah. This correlates to something that we learned earlier in Torah. Let's see, I think it was Torah Yud Ches, if I'm not mistaken. No. Or was it? Tefillah is the inyan of Ein Sof. You see how important Chazar is.
We had in Beis the concept of Yaakov and Tefillah.
Yeah, no, that's not what I'm looking for. Later on. Okay. Learned that Tefillah is the aspect of freeing oneself entirely.
Maybe it's Nister right now.
One of the Torahs, it is Nister. It is prayerful. So here the Rebbe says the same thing. Bechinas Torah Tefillah. Naaseh u'bechinas Torah. Doing is the aspect of Torah hainu aniglis mashiyadeh l'kayim, what a person understands and is able to fulfill. Nishma bechinas nistaris bechinas diburi Torah. Shema, like we said, I fixed it already. Thank you. Shehema diburim shel haTorah shesvivus kol mitzvah, which are all the diburim that surround the different mitzvahs, like we learned. Bechinas diburi haTorah. Shehema diburim shel haTorah shesvivus kol mitzvah. Shehem bechinas nister. Which is the aspect of that which is hidden, where we don't know how to serve Hashem using these words, and that's bechinas tefillah. So we have to ask Hashem to help us. That's an aspect of prayer. We don't know what to do. So what do you do when you don't know what to do? You ask Hashem for help. Nister is prayerful because it's only in the aspect of nister where I need to beg HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help me. If everything is nigla, or it's nigle. Nigle means my part. Let's say not in Limanat Torah. Parnasa is nigle. It's here, right? Health is nigle. I'm healthy, Baruch Hashem. Anything else that exists, don't need to daven for because it's nigle. It is manifest. The whole energy of tefillah is wrapped up with nister because tefillah is catalyzed by that which has not yet manifested. That's what tefillah is for. All right, come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as an ani. Right? Tefillah la'ani kiyatov. Tefillah la'ani. When a person is impoverished, when they do not have. That's why tefillah is the bechina of Malchus. Which is less lamagami klum. In a certain sense, it doesn't have. So from the standpoint of, I don't want to confuse anybody, from the standpoint of Malchus being filled, that's the aspect of nikla, it's actualized, it's here. But before Malchus is filled, Malchus fundamentally as a kli is asking from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bechinas tefillah, shehi dvekus, which is the aspect of dvekus, ki shmiya talya beliba, because nishma, which is the aspect of that which is beyond, is tali in the lave. K'may shekasa, as the pasuk says in Malachim Aleph, v'nosat la'avdecha leiv shemeh. You have given to your servant a hearing heart. What's a heart? Says Rebbe Nachman, the Gemara in Tainus tells us, v'avodah shebalev Zutfila. The avoid of the heart is prayer. So you see, Shmiya is connected to Leiv. Leiv is connected to Tefillah, which means that Tefillah is the aspect of Nishma. When Esatela Avdecha Leiv Shemea is over the Shabalev, Heavy Amr Tefillah. Nishma, that which I don't know. I have to ask. Hainu Bitol Udvekas Le'insof. nullification to the Ein Sof. Ki Ein Sof b'chinas ma she'ein bo tfisa. What is Ein Sof? Ein Sof is that which there's no grasp of. Absolutely no grasp of, meaning even higher than Atzilus. Even higher than Keser, which itself is really difficult / impossible to understand. Keser itself, especially in relation to Chochmah, which is further revealed, that's the root of our whole reality, which is contained in just one drop, the Nakuda of the letter Al, of the letter Yud, of Yud Ke Vav Ke. In relation to Chochmah, Keser is called Ayin. It's nothingness. Chochmah me Ayin timatzeh, the Pasuk says. Chochmah emerges from Ayin. Why? Because none of us can understand why Hashem created this world. We don't understand it. It's a fundamental paradox in terms. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinitely perfect. He doesn't need anything. So then how could we speak about a motivation that arose within the divine? At what point did it arise within the divine? These are questions of Malufnim. We can't ask these questions, right? It's impossible to understand. It's beyond time and space. Okay, now imagine Ein Sof. I mean, that's Keser. That correlates to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon motivation to create and sustain the world, which we have no concept of. Now talk about the infinite. We don't even know where to begin. We can't. We can't say anything. Ein Sof is the infinite mystery, but it's fundamentally, eternally, essentially unknowable. Ein Sof is ma she'ein bo tfisa. ומאחר שאין לי תפיסה בזה, היינו בדיבורי התורה הנזכר לאל כי הוא בחינת נסתר, הוא בחינת תפילה דבקות שהוא רק ביטול לאין סוף. That's the aspect of prayer, which is nullification to the Ein Sof. And this is the most heartbreaking thing. You read books and people who don't understand the Torah. Non-Jews or Jews, but also could be mostly non-Jews. Where if you read the Torah at face value, or if you only read Torah Shabbat in the context of Nigla, without any understanding of Pnimius HaTorah, it would appear that the Jews have a very lowly concept of God. This anthropomorphic man in the sky, right, who seems very controlling, demanding, expresses himself through emotion, is very wrathful much of the time. Kabbalah understands, it's going to sound like a radical thing, but you have to understand it with nuance, that the God of the Torah, right, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is a very low manifestation of the infinite, generated, as it were, by the infinite, again, Keser, for reasons we can't understand, and manifest into our reality for the standpoint of giving us the ability to connect with Him. But the God that we serve, fundamentally, the God that we daven to, is Lamala Mikol Shman, is the absolutely infinite, which is correlated to the most elevated conceptions, I would say even beyond, if you really know, of the Eastern religions, particularly Hinduism. It's called Brahman, right? The absolutely infinite grounded being. That's the God that we serve. It's not a stira, it's not a contradiction in terms. What Judaism does is it says, cool, we also agree to that. But look around at the world, that God, look, this came from somewhere. So if we're able to integrate our lived experience of reality, male, female, trees, animals, plants, and we can have a theory of why that infinite, which is a mystery to us and Hindus and Buddhists and everyone alike, if He generated this, and if we could come up with some kind of framework where we can integrate this lived experience of reality into that ultimate reality, how wondrous is that? And then we can build a theology about what it means to be able to sense that infinite power in everything He created. And then we can create a theology of the desire of the infinite to reveal itself within a perceived realm of the finite. That's something that no other religion has. Especially in Buddhism, it's all about unattaching, right? It's all about being unattached. Or in Hinduism, this world is Maya, right? This world is just total illusion, and a person has to see through all of it and then gets to moksha, which means total liberation, right? Judaism doesn't have these concepts. Because for us, in a chanami, it's an illusion, but it's a generated illusion for a purpose. The Infinite One wants us to live in that illusion. Like we learned in Torah Dalit, there are times when a person rises up into the Ein Sof. Then you return. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to live here, not there. Otherwise, he could. So what's the point? Why would he generate this reality? That's what Yiddishkeit deals with. But if a person doesn't ever encounter the Kabbalistic framework, he gets stuck in very childish, really childish, small theological approaches, which I would say, again, I don't want to say anything, overwhelming majorities of From Yidden are on a very, very low level theologically. Very, very low. They don't understand. They don't understand spheres, oilamos, keser, ein sof. They don't. There's something very beautiful and simple about it, but then it can be devastating when a person encounters in books, pejorative expressions of how lowly the God of the Old Testament, and it can be hurtful unless a person has a framework to be able to understand the bigger picture. And then to recognize that when we daven, like the Medrash tells us very, very carefully in the Sifri, a love v'lo limidosa. When we daven, we're not davening to any of the shemos, any of the spheres, chas v'shalom, a love. We're davening directly to the infinite, right? The infinite, which Rav Shamar Morgenstern has taught, a love derech midosa, because you can't daven to the infinite, either. It's just because you have to relate to him somehow. That's what tefillah is. A love v'lo limidosa, meaning we're davening to him, derech midosav, right? Meaning penetrating through the lenses of the various names and the various midas and the various spheres to be able to connect to that absolutely infinite one that's completely and entirely beyond anything else, beyond any name, beyond anything. It's just there's nothing. Judaism doesn't have any a symbol to reflect the Ein Sof. Unbelievable. Yud Kei Vav Kei is a lower Yud Kei Vav Kei, right? Mamish, the Shema Etzem, the name that all of reality is folded into, is not God. It's God's expression from the moment of his desire to create this reality. God himself, absolutely infinite. We don't even have a word to refer to it. The only word that we have is a negative, which correlates with the Rambam's negative theology, which is why the Mekubalim and the Rambam, even though in many other areas, obviously they diverge, right? For example, the rational Tamiya mitzvahs and so on. But in this regard, they absolutely align. The only thing the Mekubalim could say about God is what he isn't. Ein Sof. It's the only thing they can say. There is nothing positive. I don't mean like good. There's nothing positive that we can say about God, because anything that you say is already nothing descriptive, right? Because anything you say, the minute that you even take the breath to say it, you already were mitzamtzim.
It's double negative.
You have to say, Loi dum yasihila. For HaKadosh Baruch Hu, silence.
But he is also what he isn't.
Meaning?
So you can even describe him, but what he isn't. But even if he isn't, he's also there.
Yes. But in the illusory realm, so that I can say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in Olam HaBriah, the whole point of Yiddishkeit, where the Medrash and Veschanan tells us, Hu mekayma shel olam ve'ena olam mekaymai. Right? Of course, Malach ha'aretz kavodah, but that's not where he is. And if I say that that's only where he is, and I forget the fact that if you go higher and higher and higher the layers and levels of reality, all of reality collapses into that perspective, then I'm limiting him. This is called, if you need English terminology for it, it's called panentheism, which is in contradistinction to pantheism. Pantheism was Spinoza's idea, right, which says that the world is God, and that this reality is itself God, which is a very subtle Kabbalistic error. Like Rav Kook explains, our belief is panentheism, which God is here, but God is infinitely beyond as well. I shouldn't say as well, fundamentally. Also, HaKadosh Baruch Hu generated this reality. In my ideal world, every year 10 boy knows all of this, backwards and forwards, no less than any 10-year-old Hindu, who's already been meditating for years. Their culture is a spiritual culture. We are supposed to be the link between East and West, is something that I mentioned before. Yeah. We've become so westernized because we've been in exile in the West for so long, except for the Sephardim, and the Sephardim Taka do have a little bit of a more mystical, more emotive aspect. We've been totally westernized as a nation. And that was part of the journey of exile. We had to go from east to west to be able to pick up the rational categories which have helped us a tremendous amount. But as we get closer and closer to Mashiach, we need to reclaim our Eastern roots. Which, to put in other terminology, we need to reclaim those roots which are actually themselves the original roots of the East in the first place, not our Eastern roots. Meaning, the only reason there's any spirituality in the East is because it comes from here. And then if we can reclaim this aspect of Naaseh and Nishma, Nigla and Ister, if we can make the balance between them, which again, I've said a million times, is the only thing we ever argue for. It's not that one should replace the other, because what's the point? Right? That's still unhealth. The point is, we need to integrate the two. But if this was a major focus, not like a nice cherry on top, this is basics, Aleph Beis, if we had teachers who were capable of giving this over. And we were able to really, I would say in more natural settings, around campfires, one-on-one, in nature, give over the principles of Emunah. Not just like living Emunah, nice Emunah stories. I'm talking about Das. I'm not talking about Emunah stories. It's all beautiful and wonderful. I'm talking about metaphysics. Really understanding the nature of reality from the Jewish perspective. I believe that everything would change. I believe that so many of the issues that we're experiencing individually and communally are a direct result or symptoms of this fundamental lack, this fundamental ignorance that has affected us societally in our values, in our perspectives, in our opinions, in our feelings, in our thoughts. This is my dream. This is my vision.
I want to say that the way that you expressed it, the coming down, is literally the meaning of Haben Yakari Ephraim Yelad Shashur, the idea of the father coming down, sitting down with the child on the floor. That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealing himself in the Torah, because it needs to be a dogma which is accessible to every yid. So
Absolutely.
It comes as low as possible. But the father isn't the father that sits down on the floor and plays. He's coming down on the floor to play, so the child can relate to him.
The Berditchever says this mashal many times. He says it in the name of his Rebbe, the Maggid Mizrich. He gives the mashal of a father teaching his son that even though the father's wisdom is infinitely beyond what he's able to reveal to his son, he's mitzamtzim himself to learn Chumash Rashi and to stick to the basic or basic enough levels when he's teaching, even though his own wisdom is infinitely beyond. That's called tzimtzum. Okay, so again, everything that we said in the latter part of the shiur is Soides Elyon. These are deep, very, very nuanced truths, but they're fundamental for us to grasp, like Shema Yisrael, and Baruch Shem. Like it's an Aleph Beis, Aleph Beis, Aleph Beis. Hashem should bless us with clarity, understanding of who we are, why we're here, what Hashem is, what He isn't, and how to be mevatel ourselves to that infinite mystery, and thereby to heal the
ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני